Alrighty. So we'll kind of go through the whole thing, and I'll kind of do a brief introduction and everything else. Um, so this is your Psych 325 course. Um, if you have any questions, feel free to email me or text me or call me. And I'll kind of go through that in the syllabus and everything else. And it's one of those things where I try to encourage you to let me know before you actually call me. It's best to text me beforehand, and it's just good practice. One, you don't want to kind of just call somebody randomly. You don't want to just kind of do that whole cold call kind of thing. You want to make sure that you're initially setting them up so they know what you'll be talking to them about. And the same applies here in this course. And if you had my courses before, I kind of reiterate that time and time again. So I'll kind of go through that. So this is your Psych 325 course. So without further ado, I'll continue onwards. All right, so hello, my name is Mr. Barber. One of the things is I try to reiterate that time and time again. Initially, we're not necessarily on a first name basis. So that's where I primarily just refer to myself as Mr. Barber. And if you have the same inclination, let me know. But one of the biggest things that I've kind of always looked at, even from a professional sphere and also from a counseling aspect, a lot of times when I counsel an individual, it's always just with my title of just Mr. Barber. And I'm not really into the whole title thing and everything else, a professor and instructor and all that. I'll refer to myself as an instructor and also as your professor. But overall, Mr. Barber will pretty much work. So within that, so Yat Eshe, Mr. Barbie and Ishia. So initially within that, this was during my time, if you look at to the picture to the left, far left, initially that's Amber Crotty. So within that, I've worked with her at times in terms of doing various coalitions and everything else. So one of the biggest things is I primarily work in the area of prevention. And that's where I spent a lot of my life working, was in the area of prevention work and stuff like that. So within that, that's where I kind of list a lot of things from that outlook. So initially, you have my two different images. I don't know why I put that in there, but it's in there. Again, it's just one of those reiterations of how time flies. And then you have a random picture of me with my N95 mask. And one of the biggest things is this was at the beginning of the pandemic. I think I was probably the only individual that was really trying to stress individuals to start wearing masks and everything else. Everybody kind of looked at it from the angle of, again, like I said, a lot of my background is from forensic psychology, emphasis on homeland security. So initially, that's where I'm always looking at. I'm always looking at it from a homeland security perspective. And so within that, that's where you kind of get a lot of the knowledge and a lot of information from. It's just from my time working with different coalitions, different areas, and different prevention work and everything else. So within that, that's one of the biggest things I'm always looking at. So again, that's me with my N95. The other one I'm looking somewhat, I think it's when I had hair. So if you look at they both have images where I have hair and where it's kind of slightly coiffed to one side. So now it's kind of pretty much high and tight. So initially it's I pretty much keep it short. So if you see me out and about, again, it's okay to say hi. It's okay to say hello. I won't. I know it's one of those things where a lot of individuals feel like they're trying to go incognito. Within that, so again, that's one of the things is. This is just me in general, in terms of mentalism, preventionism, I am your instructor, so within that I'll move forward. So here's a little bit about me. My clans are Tachini, so Tachini Shlikiane Bashin Ashin Dashache Huathan Dashanada. Tsena Dan Nasha. So initially I'm actually from Round Rock. Well, I live in Round Rock. I'm actually originally from New Mexico, Shiprock, so that's where I was born. So I'm a New Mexican, but I've lived out here for a number of years. Pretty much grew up out here, out in Round Rock. Within that, I formerly known as Captain Awesome, and the name kind of just stuck. It was one of those things where I was working with different communities and different schools, and the name kind of just came out. I don't know how it came out. So within that, I've stuck with it, and that's fine. I'm okay with it. And this was during my time when I was working with domestic violence and sexual assault. So I used to work with a lot of schools and a lot of high schools on the reservation, doing a lot of community education and prevention work, also in the area of domestic violence and sexual assaults. In addition to that, I received a BA in psychology from the University of New Mexico from years and years ago. And also, I currently have also a Master's of Arts in Forensic Psychology, emphasis on Homeland Security. And then now I'm currently pursuing a doctorate in clinical psychology. And one of my main, my dissertation is primarily focused on domestic violence and domestic violence on the Navajo Nation, and kind of those impacts and everything else. Within that, during my graduate studies, I worked within a residential care program. Again, these were with children that had adults that had developmental needs, that had developmental needs, and within that, they had very developmental disabilities. Within that, that's where I was able to apply a lot of my undergraduate studies. But it also gave me the aspect of that charity work, and also that aspect of patience. So within that, during my time at the domestic violence program, I was able to work with a lot of victims. And during my time, I also worked with, I created a small program on the side where I was working with inmates as well. And one of the biggest key insights that I gained from working with inmates was just that element of psychoeducation, educating a lot of the individuals, but also the impact of how trauma kind of envelops a lot of individuals in different portions of their lives, whether at a young age, whether in the middle times of their age, whether even into adulthood and everything else. And so that was kind of my time that I was working with the correctional facility in Chenling. So I did that for about 5 years. So again, like I said, it was a side project that I first started, and then I started working as a private independent consultant. So I did that for a while as well. And so during my time, I was doing a lot of the correctional education pro bono. And so during that time, it kind of just gave me more leeway, more insight into criminality on the Navajo Nation. A lot of times we utilize a lot of the criminality from more of a Western standpoint and everything else, but when you apply a lot of the Western standpoints to a lot of the issues that are happening on the reservation, you're able to extract a lot more. You're able to understand the uniquenesses that happen on the reservation. And that's where I really come from. I really come from a lot of that insight of more of a boots on the ground kind of outlook. I don't necessarily, like I said, I like working in academia, but it's one of those things where it's best to kind of have that boots on the ground kind of outlook where you're actually involved working on projects in the community. And it's one of those things where you kind of get out of that ivory tower outlook. The ivory tower just simply meaning that a lot of times in academia you kind of get caught up in that whole element of doing studies, but a lot of the studies are mostly based on more of a very clear cut outlook, versus if you work in the communities, a lot of times you have different things come up, you have different uniquenesses, and that's where a lot of times you're having to apply your skill sets immediately. And that's where I always like to work within. So moving forward. So I am your instructor, and I will try my best to ensure that I not only motivate you to succeed, but also to motivate you to become the most brilliant person in the room. One of the biggest things I'm always looking at is making sure that you can hold your own. A lot of times, we go about in life and we want to be the most educated person, but at times, you kind of just also have to kind of look at things from a wisdom-based outlook. You want to kind of say, okay, what things am I going to contribute? Can I contribute something? Or am I just simply going to just share information? If I'm going to share information, is it relevant? And so that's one of the things you're always having to look at. And a lot of my classes, a lot of my courses that I teach, I'm always having to have students share their insights, but I'm also wanting them to back it up. And that's where a lot of times if you have me in previous courses, I'm always reiterating the fact of making sure that you have scholarly in-text citation and also referencing. And I know some students look at it like, oh my gosh, this is so ridiculous. I'm just trying to share my insight. And that's great. I want you to share your insight, but I also want you to be able to have a relevance in terms of where did you get that insight from? And if you say, hey, I got it from my own, and that's great, that's awesome, but where did you learn it from? And if you learn it from somebody, and that's where you're always doing, you're always trying to make sure that when you're working with communities, they're going to ask those same questions. And that's, like I said, I've always come from that outlook of when I work with communities, they've asked me those questions. And simply saying, I'm Diné will not suffice. A lot of times as Navajos, we kind of just look at that outlook of, I'm going to fall back to the element of, well, I'm Diné. Well, a lot of the people that you'll be working with, guess what? They're Diné too. And they're looking at you like, hey, we want more. We want more of we want a better answer. And so that's where you're having to apply a lot of the academic outlooks. So the oddity of our minds, herein lies the uniqueness of this course. Again, I want you to be able to not only learn the aspects of thinking outside of the proverbial box, but also defend your stance on issues pertaining to psychology. A lot of times you're having to create a stance. You're having to share your insight and try to step outside of it. Again, sometimes you come across individuals, and like I said, when I was counseling, a lot of times you have individuals throwing around terminology. You have individuals throwing around, like OCD or ADHD and all these different great terminologies that apply to mental illness. But at times, the reality is some of the issues that happen on the Navajo Nation are very unique to just that, the Navajo Nation. And so when you're throwing around a lot of these terminologies, a lot of times they don't fit within that initial checkbox. So that's where you're having to always look outside of the proverbial box and try to say, okay, how can I apply this? What things am I seeing that maybe other places are not seeing? I guess the best example, right now, currently I'm working on a project within the area of missing and murdered, the Missing and Murdered Diné Relatives initiative with Diné College. And one of the biggest things is that I've been able to look at right now is even just the element of looking at what is missing. A lot of times we simply say, oh, well, a missing person. Well, what is that? And that's where I've had to look at it theoretically. I have to look at it practically and try to say, okay, what does the term missing mean? And so that's one of the things you're having to always do when you're looking and working with different communities. You're having to say, okay, maybe this had been approached similarly in this way, but now as time progressed, maybe we need to approach it from a different angle. And so that's one of the things you're always looking at is how can I approach it from the angle that I feel is most beneficial to the Navajo people or the different communities I'll be working with, stuff like that. So what does this course entail? The course will focus on theories, research, and practice in psychology as related to the law and the justice system, including criminal, civil, domestic relations, and professional issues. The primary goal of this course is to provide an introduction to the field of psychology and law. Again, I'll go through this. This is kind of just a quick overview, and you'll have this pretty much to look at as well. It'll be in your resource bank, in your Blackboard. If you look on the menu side and everything else, you'll find it there. And that's where a lot of the PowerPoints are as well. So within that, it's kind of where you'll be looking at. Again, some of the things is I do modify a lot of my own PowerPoints, and those PowerPoints are mine. But I will share with you kind of the rudimentary PowerPoints that you can utilize, but a lot of the PowerPoints that I'll use in a lot of my lectures, a lot of times some of them are even slightly modified, again, because those are primarily the property of me. So within that, it is, and I do try to share with you the rudimentary PowerPoints, just so that you kind of get a good base knowledge. But as we continue onwards, again, that's one of the things that we kind of reiterate. So it's one of those areas where I try to share with you as much as I can. But again, for testing purposes and stuff like that, a lot of times you're having to delve into the book yourself. You're having to delve into the information yourself and kind of extract a lot of those information as we're continuing onwards. So, okay. So, why so much writing, and why? One of the biggest things that I love teaching within this course is the element of criminal theory and crime in and of itself. And one of the biggest things is if you look at the first bulletin, you'll be looking at, or the first bullet, you'll be looking at the theory to practice paper. One of the biggest things is this is probably going to be the most stressful paper you're ever going to write overall in the course. It's only worth, I believe, only 40 points, but I am a big stickler on this theory to practice paper. The reason why I say that is this theory to practice paper, you're really trying to write succinctly, and that's where you're trying to summate a lot of the information. In other words, you're trying to break it down, and that's where students have tried to utilize quotes, and quotes are great. I'm not saying quotes are not good. I'm just indicating that when you utilize quotes, you utilize the proper citation. But overall, I try to stress that you try to limit your quotes as well and utilize a lot of more of what is considered paraphrasing, so that one, you're putting it into your own words. And within that, you want to make sure that you're able to break it down for yourself and also present in that distinction. Number 3, make predictions with the factors that help to explain variation in thinking and reasoning within the field of crime and psychology. Number 4, is develop skills for expressing ideas clearly. Again, this is one of the biggest things that you're looking at is you want to make sure that you're breaking the articles down, you're breaking the information down, and you're reiterating it in a way that is practical, useful, and can be applied immediately. Again, this is not a creative writing course. This is not poetry, and it's one of those things where I've had students, indicate, can I utilize this, this, and this? Again, no. One of the biggest things you're looking at is applying it from a practical sense. And then number, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Develop your knowledge of the fields of forensic psychology in its applied and practical sense. And then number 6, research questions and problems. One of the biggest things you're looking at is how can I apply it? How can I utilize it? How can I apply a lot of these research questions and these issues so that I can utilize it even in the field currently? So the important note, do not skip. So this is in your syllabus, and I will go through your syllabus as well. So this is kind of here. So again, I'll have you go through it yourself. Like I said, you'll have this. You'll have the PowerPoint. It'll be listed in your resource, I believe, or yeah, I believe it's in your resource, the resource portion in your menu on Blackboard. So I really urge you to look at this one, and I will go over it a little later, because again, I'll be going through the whole syllabus as well to kind of get you caught up. Course goals. So again, the course goals is related to so the first one is thinking, and critical thinking will be applied within the course, not planning. Planning will be applied in which you are given the necessary tools for success, but it is up to you to plan accordingly so as to ensure that you succeed. Overall, I do try to supply you with as many articles as possible, so that you're able to implement that even in your writing. Ina, living, the focus on life skills, implementation, and living mindfully, both with yourself and the world around you. And then sichasen, assuring. In other words, the focus is twofold. Number 1, you make the effort to complete the course because it's up to you to make it happen. Number 2, to confidently solidify the information within so that you can become a positive beacon of both hope and strength to those around you. One of the biggest things is when I teach a lot of my courses, I want you to be able to utilize it. I want you to be able to implement it even into your everyday lives. And I had individuals who kind of look at it like, I just took the course, I really didn't care. That's great. I'm glad for that. But one of the biggest things is a lot of you come from different communities. And the reality is when you're coming from different communities, you may be that only beacon of hope for a lot of people that you're trying to help. And the reason why I say that is when I was working on the reservation, and even currently now, when I work on the reservation, when I work with different communities, at times I'm that only resource. And that's one of the biggest things I kind of reiterate time and time again, is you want to have good, accurate information so that when you're sharing that with individuals and families and stuff like that, you want to make sure that you're bringing across a beacon of hope, so that you're trying to help them in the situation that they're in. And then you have the students will understand the self through the teachings of the protection way. Sorry. And Blessing Way teachings, this course will emphasize the importance of developing self-awareness, in other words, original thought, by increasing knowledge of how the mind works. Again, number, let's see, 1, 2, 3, the last bullet. Through this effort, much of the knowledge has been applied whilst working in the field on navigation, and what one considered best practices, both from both a cultural mindset and also a Western outlook. Bear in mind that at times this level of thought can be considered challenging, given that the Western outlook may be in contrast to the philosophy. But in order to have a broad understanding, one must be willing to prevail onwards to better both themselves and others that may be in contact with in the future. If you have questions, please do not hesitate to ask. Within this is kind of like a side note, and the reason why I have this in there is a lot of times you have individuals who only adapt to only one side of the knowledge wheel. And one of the biggest things is when you're working with people, you're going to come across different people across all walks of life, even on the Navajo Nation, and they're all going to have different mindsets. And if you only adhere to one, bear in mind it kind of limits your ability to offer insight. And so, like I said, it's one of those things where I try to teach you the necessary skill sets to help you when you're working out in the field. And that's one of the biggest things I'm always looking at is how can you be helped while you're working on the field. So the textbook, here's the textbooks that you'll be using. The first one is Reitman's Psychology and the Legal System. The second one is the Ethical Practices in Forensic Psychology. So within that, I'll kind of just go over this really quickly. The first one, you'll be tested on this a lot. You'll be quizzed on it actually a lot. I don't really like to use the word test. You'll be quizzed on the psychology and the legal system more so. The second one is more of practicality. You'll be utilizing that in your discussion questions for the last portion. It is listed in your syllabus as well, and it kind of breaks it down. But I'll kind of indicate what areas I'll be using within the second book. Both are very useful. Again, the second book is more of the ethicality, and I can't really test ethicality, I guess that's the best way to put it, because each portion that when you're utilizing ethics, it comes across from different angles. And one of the things is you're having to try to utilize what is the best course of action in that given situation. And so that's where the ethicality kind of helps. And again, ethical practices is primarily there to help guide with decision making and stuff like that. So that's where I'll kind of leave that for the second portion of the course and everything else. So PowerPoints. So again, you'll list it here. So this is back. If you look at it, you'll find your PowerPoints listed kind of there, and it says resources, PowerPoints, guides, articles. Again, you'll find a lot of the information there for your resources. So you'll have your PowerPoints, guides, and also additional articles that may come up that I feel like you need to know. Even if you don't need to know it, I'll list different articles there as well. Again, you should be able to download a lot of the PowerPoints. If you have a pop-up blocker, make sure that you're able to open the access so that you're able to download a lot of the articles as well as a lot of the PowerPoints. And I've also had students say, it's not working, it's not this, it's not that. A lot of times it just comes down to bandwidth, because I do test it on my end. And if you have an issue, please email me, and I can just send it to you directly, the article or whichever. A lot of times, if you're going to do that, text me so that you kind of let me know. Because I've had students kind of come from the other angle of, it's not working, therefore I'm not going to do the assignment. Don't do that. You're an adult, so hopefully you're able to rationalize and also implement the next course of action. So within that, bear that in mind. So I urge you to take a look at the syllabus and also download the syllabus as a schedule for the assignments is listed within. Within that, you'll have kind of a listing, and I'll go through that even with the last portion of the syllabus and everything else. I'll kind of go through that. So critical thinking. This is where I want you to be able to back up your argument or opinion with scholarly application. Again, that's where I leave that. A lot of it up to you in terms of the next course of action. So I cannot stress this enough. Communication is key. You'll find that my cell phone number is listed in your syllabus, and it kind of has a reiteration of things of how to contact me and everything else and what things you do. But one of the biggest things is, even though I study psychology, I am not a psychic. And I cannot stress that enough. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I've had students who will get upset even after the course is over, or even as the course is going on, saying, why is it Mr. Barber, why doesn't he work with me? And the reality is, if you've never contacted me and suddenly it's the end of the semester and suddenly you're saying, well, I had this crisis, this, and this, and it's 2-3 weeks past the initial crisis and suddenly you're letting me know. Again, one of the biggest things is if you work in the workplace, and again, like I said, I come from working as both a coordinator and also managing my own staff, and also working as an independent consultant. And one of the biggest things is communication is key. If I were to simply, not show up with an initial PowerPoint or initial product to a person that has hired me, again, one, I would be fired. Two, I won't get paid. Again, the same thing applies for each of you. Is communication is key, in that if you don't let me know, and if you simply just wait until the last minute to let me know about something, and then suddenly you're saying, he's not working with me. Again, that's one of the things. I'll just simply show this to you again, and I'll pull it up even from the syllabus. The syllabus also has noted in there as well, and I will go over that a little later. But one of the biggest things is just communication. Communicate with me. Let me know. Because if you don't, again, I won't know what's going on. Again, that's one of the biggest things. Is I will send you notices periodically throughout the semester. And I'll do updates here and there. Again, if you've had me before in many of your classes, a lot of students know that I have a pretty quick turnaround in terms of contacting. So literally, I've had students simply say, I emailed him, in less than an hour, he emailed me back, or he contacted me back and everything else. And one of the biggest things is, it doesn't always happen that way, but overall, I'm pretty punctual in terms of making sure that I give you an answer back. So that's one of the biggest things, is communication is key. Number 2, Zoom meetings. For Zoom meetings, please just text me a time to meet. I will get back to you as soon as I can. I've had students simply try to make their own arrangements. I really urge you not to do that. One of the biggest things is letting me know, and then we can agree on a time so that we can meet. And please stick to it. If you miss a Zoom meeting and then it keeps happening, at some point it's kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, now this is just being unprofessional. But one of the biggest things is just making sure that you have that leeway in terms of communicating with me. If you want to go by Zoom, that's fine. If you do go by Zoom, please turn on your video. I've had students simply, at times I'm usually just talking to a blank face. And I do value my time as well, and I do value your time as well. So if you are going to set up a Zoom meeting, please just focus only on that at that given moment. And I know it sounds like a lot that I'm asking, but it just comes down to the area of professionalism. And it's one of those things where if you're going to counseling or social work or any type of field, even the area of public health, making sure that the individual that you're working with, you're reiterating to them that the time that you're spending with them is valuable. And that's one of the biggest things. Is I want to kind of reiterate that here as well. So if you want to email me, by all means do so. Turnaround time is usually 24 hours to respond, but a lot of times it's a lot quicker. If you do not hear from me in 24 hours, just send me a text. But I also urge you to wait. I know that at times you may send an email, and you waited a whole 5 minutes. I've had students do that too. They've sent me a text or send me an email, and they're waiting, and suddenly they're sending me my whole voicemail is pretty much blowing up and everything else, because I've had students saying you didn't email me, I sent you an email and you didn't respond back. Bear in mind, I'm not attached to my phone at all times. A shocker, yes. So with that, I try to make sure that I have a good turnaround. If you don't hear from me, send a notice. Let me know. Sometimes even the emails kind of get completely bombarded. There's times where I have numerous students, numerous areas where individuals will be emailing me constantly and everything else. So just if you don't hear from me within that 24 hour, if it's 2-3 weeks down the road, send me a text, or just send me another email and say, hey, I'm just following up. Again, it's just it just helps me to know what is happening, and it also just creates that dialogue as well. So. Internet from your syllabus. Again, this is also from your syllabus. I think there is some modification even in this one. This is kind of a dated one, but this is kind of just an overview as well. You should have good, reliable internet. But in addition to that, please make sure that you do have reliable internet service, so that you're able to supply or implement, or not implement, but initially upload a lot of your assignments. Like I said, I don't really do Zoom meetings. The reason why is it takes too much of your bandwidth as well, too much of your data, and I really don't want to take up your data. I don't want you buying additional data for this, that, and the other. Because I believe right now, YouTube, that's where I upload a lot of my lectures. So it makes it a lot easier for you to simply watch a video on there versus doing a Zoom meeting. Zoom meeting takes up a lot of your data, and so that's where I kind of move away from that. But again, make sure you have reliable internet. I had students simply say, well, I don't have internet, so I can't do the course. That's your responsibility, and I will just point that out. A lot of times, even from the brief survey, I believe that was given to each of you at the beginning of the semester, or even before you took the course, or even before you actually signed up for the course, they did ask if you have good internet, and a lot of you indicated yes. So if that's the case, that's what I will fall back on as well, because that is your responsibility. And the reason why I say that is I've had students simply say, well, you don't know how it is. I actually do. The reason why I say that is when I was working on my master's in forensic psychology, I was doing a correspondence course and also an online course, or online. It was an online format. So within that, this is way before even Cell 1 and Choice kind of took off. So what I would do is I would sit actually in front of NAU when NAU was still in Chinle, and I would sit outside of their actual building, which was right next to Ace Hardware in Chinle, and I would sit out there and I would upload a lot of my assignments that way, or I would go to the chapter house, or I would do this and that, just so that I could upload a lot of my assignments. One, because if I told my professor I'm having internet issues, all they would simply say to me is, well, you took the course, that's your responsibility. Again, within that, I still give you a little bit of leeway in that, as long as you let me know and you keep me in the loop. But in addition to that, I think currently right now, internet uploading information is kind of one of those things where it is going to be a little unique. Each semester is kind of unique, and again, even through the beginning of the pandemic, that's when everything was shifting. Again, it's one of those things where I still had students that were still able to upload and submit a lot of their work. So again, that's where I hold all of you accountable for that as well. If you feel like, hey, I can't do the course because there's too many assignments, I don't know what to tell you. I really don't, because I've had students say that there's way too much assignments, and there's not much I can tell you, because one of the biggest things is this is a 300 level course, so therefore I will hold you to that same standard. But overall, like I said, communication is key. So if you can communicate with me and everything else, and we'll try to work something out. But overall, this is kind of a breakdown in terms of internet. So internet additional. I know this is the res. I've worked a majority of my career on the res and I live on the res. So I live in Round Rock. So big surprise there. Cell network sometimes does get knocked down at times. And one of the biggest things that I also come across is I've had students say, well, my webmail doesn't work, or my Gmail doesn't work, or I'm not able to. Be careful when you use that, because I want you to be honest with it. I've had students simply say, well, I'm going to use that as my excuse. The reason why I say that is I do communicate with IT a lot. And IT will also look into whether or not you've accessed your internet as well, or if you've accessed your Gmail at any point. And even if you upload, or even if you've accessed a lot of the information on Blackboard, it will timestamp it. It'll timestamp when you last looked at an assignment and everything else. So one of the biggest things is make sure that you're being responsible about that as well. Like I said, I've had students who use that as an excuse before, and when you show them the timestamp, it's not that great. Again, if you're having issues, let me know. It's just one of those things where students have tried to submit an assignment once or twice, and then suddenly they give up. I hope you don't do that. I hope you kind of go above and beyond. I've had some students simply say, hey, you know what? I did the assignment. I know it's late, but I tried to turn it in at the given due date, but it's not uploading and everything else. Can I just email it to you? Again, if you do that, let me know ahead of time as well, and also send me a notice so that I can look at it and grade it, and I can put a grade in there. Because I've had students simply say, you know what, there was no window or there was no way I could upload the assignment, and they just give up. So it's one of those things where I just want to make sure that you take that time to, hey, I'm doing my due diligence as well. And again, that falls back on you as well. So I urge you to not do that. Communication is key in these situations. If you don't communicate with me, I won't know. Assignments. You will have various assignments as listed within the syllabus. Please do not fall behind. Bear in mind that this is your responsibility. P.S. The excuse of the dog ate my homework won't work here. I'm sorry. In addition to that, there's also in the syllabus, it kind of has a different, an additional reiteration. I've had students simply say, well, I'm taking 3 or 4 or 5 courses. That's on you. I can't, like I said, when I was at UNM, if I overloaded myself on courses and I started falling behind on one course or the other, that's on me. I can't tell my professor, hey, can you work with me somehow? Because they're simply going to look at you as, well, you need to figure out something. You need to have better time management, or you need to move your schedule around somehow. And the same applies here. Please make sure that you actually have good time management setups, because again, it's one of those things where it falls back on you. And I've had students simply say, that's not fair. The reality is, for a lot of you, you're going into the workplace. And one of the biggest things is, like I said, I've supervised also interns, and I hold them to that same standard when I supervise interns. And one of the biggest things is they've tried to use those same excuses of this, that, and the other. And at the end of the day, it's one of those things where it's like, all right, you need to have better time management setups. And again, it's one of those things where I leave it up to you. If you need to drop another course or take it easy this semester, again, I leave that up to you as well. But it's one of those things where I do hold you to the same standard across the board. And I know I had students who simply said, well, I have more struggles than other students. We don't all really know that, because one of the biggest things is to simply state that. All I would say is, well, I'm sorry to hear that. But I have to hold everybody to the same standard. I can't delineate from that, because if I do, then it'd be unethical. And so again, that's one of the things is where communication really comes in. So again, I have to stress that time and time again. Alrighty. So discussion assignments. You'll find the discussion forum. I believe it's labeled discussion forum. It might have been slightly modified, but not too much to where you won't know what it is. That's where you're going to find a lot of your discussion assignments located at. Drinking some coffee right now. One of the biggest things that you'll find is your discussion assignments are worth a lot of points. 20 points overall. And within that, I think that's where a lot of students kind of utilize this from other courses where they felt that they didn't really need to do a lot in their discussion forums or discussion assignments. And uniquely enough, these discussion assignments, what they do is they build up, if you don't already have a good bearing in regards to APA formatting, or APA styling, a lot of the discussion forum kind of just helps you and it guides you along those lines. If you notice, and you'll find that out as time progresses, you'll find the rubric where it'll indicate, in-text citation and referencing. I'm a big stickler on that. The reason why is I want you to share your insights, but I also want you to prove it. I want you to have additional insights that can support your answers. And that's primarily what I'm teaching you what to do in terms of when you work in the field. A lot of times that's what you're having to face is the public, and the public will always ask the question of, where did you find these answers? How did you come across these answers? And for certain individuals, they're fine with, oh yeah, my grandma taught me that. But for others, they want more. They want a greater substance. They want a greater validity. And the reason why that happens is, and I know that's where a lot of individuals kind of get a little perturbed about that, because one, they may feel like, hey, my grandma was a great practitioner or was a medicine woman, or my grandfather was a medicine man, and they have great validity. And the issue always lies in the fact that different communities, even on the reservation, even on the Navajo Nation, so say for example, if you go into mini farms, or if you go to Lower Greasewood or Upper Greasewood, or you go throughout all the other different communities, each one will have their own different teachings. Even though it's Diné teachings and Diné philosophy, a lot of times they'll have different outlooks. And that's the reason why I try to make sure that when you're presenting to all these different communities and when you're working with these different communities, you have to have a level of validity. And that's where a lot of times I'm a big stickler on referencing an in-text citation, because one, I want you to be able to say, yes, this is where I found it, this is where I came to this assumption and to this conclusion and everything else. Again, please keep the schedule, as this can prove to be cumbersome if you fall behind. And I've noted that before, time and time again. And a lot of students will sometimes say, I'm gonna kind of wing it. Don't. I've had students try to wing it and they failed. So again, the excuse of I was not able to complete because I did not have the book or the article is nil. In other words, the excuse of I didn't have the book or I didn't have the article will not fly. The reason why is most of the discussion forums, most of the discussion questions, if you were able to do a good web search, you'd be able to find a lot of the different article supports to supply an initial answer in your discussion forums. But overall, majority of the information is provided. Aside from a lot of times you'll have a lot of different articles to glean over and to read over. Take that time to actually read them. Some of them are pretty good. Some of them help you to along the way. They'll help you in terms of having a better understanding of psychology and the law. So in-text citation and referencing. For many of you, these elements are foreign to you. I'm a huge stickler on these elements. Again, this helps you in the field of business, psychology, social work, counseling, and more. Again, I believe there's a guide. There's a PowerPoint guide, APA style guide, in your resource bracket. Oh, excuse me. And within that, you'll have those different uniquenesses that helps you along the way. And excuse me, sorry. So again, that's pretty much what I'm always looking at, is in-text citation and referencing, making sure that you give credit where credit is due. Again, take a look at the guides listed in the resource tab in Blackboard. More tools are also listed within your assignments in PDF format. Again, I urge you not to overlook the various elements, as this can impact your grade. I've had students had great insight, but they did not have the necessary in-text citation referencing, and they started to lose points. And by the end of the semester, they lost a huge chunk of their points just because they didn't feel that they needed to implement referencing and in-text citation. Again, I can't force you to do anything that you don't want to do, but this is kind of one of those elements where this kind of keeps you on track. So scholarly references, what is it? Glad you asked. Here's a video on what a scholarly article is. So click on that. You'll find the videos there. If you click on the PowerPoint, you'll find it there. So articles and where to find them. So here you're going to find the library. So click on that. You're going to click on resources for research. Click above for online articles or jump to the database. And that's where you're going to click. And then now you're on the right page. So what you're going to do is when you get to that page, you're going to scroll all the way down. So once you get to the bottom, you'll find psychology listed there. You'll have psych articles, psych books, psych info, as well as the native health database. That's where you're going to get a lot of your information, a lot of your articles to have your support and everything else when you're writing your library research paper as well as your theory to practice paper. So here's the part that a lot of students sometimes don't. There's a pitfall, and that's where a lot of students feel that when they go into psych articles, they type it out as if they're typing an actual phrase. For example, like they believe it's like Google or any of those search formats and everything else. Again, when you look in here, they're not looking. It's not looking like Google. It will not search like Google. You have to be very specific about what you're looking at. You have to be very specific about what things you're looking at. And so that's where you're going to have to take some time to look at that. I urge you to take some time to really look at that and look at finding information. So academic honesty. One of the biggest things that I'm a big stickler on is I don't accept recycled paper. And a lot of times you're thinking like, wow, he is all about, the environment. Not necessarily. What I'm saying here is I do not want you to recycle a paper that you submitted to another course. And the reason why I say that is it goes through SafeAssign. And when it goes through SafeAssign, it'll indicate to me whether or not it's plagiarized, whether or not it's a copied paper, and it'll pull up all the different resources that it's listed, and it'll find where that paper has been utilized. So that's one of the things is every time you're writing, always try to make sure that's original work. Well, not try, but make sure it's original work for the initial course itself and also for the initial assignment. And I've had students say that's not great, that's not fair, it's a lot of work. If you feel like it's a lot of work, maybe I don't know. I don't know what to tell you, because again, college is one of those unique endeavors where the expression and also the testing of your mind will be pressed. So again, that's one of the biggest things that I always try to reiterate. So again, I try to make sure that a lot of my courses are rigorous. So long as you put in the work, put in the time, you will succeed. So SafeAssign, again, this is a tool that helps in seeing if various writings that are submitted are not plagiarized. Again, one of the things I look at, and I'll go over that in the syllabus as well, but here's kind of just a reiteration. Lastly, rubrics. This will kind of go hand in hand with the grades. One of the biggest things I always try to tell a lot of my students is I'm not going to hide anything from you. I try to be as transparent as humanly possible. One of the biggest things is, and I always tell a lot of my students, is you see exactly what I see. Again, this goes into the grading aspect. So whatever I grade, you'll be able to see it. And a lot of times my turnaround time is usually 48 to 72 hours. Sometimes it goes a little over. And that's just based on the amount of students I have that I'm taking care of, or the amount of paperwork that I'm taking care of. And so a lot of times it just comes down to that. But overall, as noted, you see exactly what I see. I try to urge a lot of my students, and I urge each of you, to just monitor your grades. I try not to make it too hard in terms of the grading process, primarily just for me. So you kind of have like the possible grades. So again, if you look at the point systems, you have about 500 points altogether. So with that 500 points, that's possible. So if you get like 487, roughly that could be, I believe, an A. But if you say, for example, if you were to get like a 293, let me just calculate that, 293 out of 500, that comes out to a 58%. So roughly that indicates that you turn in work, yes, but your score for a lot of the work that was submitted is a 293. And that would be divided by 500, which gives me a 0.58%. So roughly I'm looking at 58%, which gives me, I believe it's still an F. I'm not. I have to double check and everything else, but it's a really low score. So again, that's where I make it very simple. So that's one of the things I've had students say, well, I submitted my work, and if I look at your work and a lot of it's blank, bear in mind you don't get participation points. If you submit the work, great. Hopefully you did the work. But if it's blank, then I can't grade anything. So that's kind of pretty much how I function. That's how pretty much I grade a lot of your work. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. So the next following slides are just your syllabus. So I urge you to go over that. I won't go over that with you, but I leave that up to you to read that. You will have a quiz on it, and I will indicate when the quiz is due, and it should be indicated on the email that we'll send out. So if you have any questions, let me know. Other than that, have an awesome first day. I know this would be the 11th. So what I do is I record a lot of these prior. So again, that's one of the things is this would be the 11th. So we'll be starting course on the 11th. So within that, if you have any questions, let me know. Other than that, be awesome, be amazing. Toodles.